Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
It is the BJ Show. I'm Brad. He's John. We're talking about this last segment, whatever you want to call it, about the Trump trial. And the interesting part of this is I heard a guy break this down where essentially no matter what Trump did, he did it illegally. Now, the main point of this thing is the fact that he paid off Stormy Daniels, and essentially he paid it off out of essentially personal funds, okay? And they are saying they're saying that he should not have done that. He should have paid that off through his campaign funds. And the bizarre part of this is I've heard an attorney say that both ways are wrong. You know, I mean, it's to the point where it's like...
Yeah, So how should it have been paid off?
Well, they're essentially saying under the law, there is no legal way to do this. I mean, in other words, he put this on his personal expenses. Somehow or another, he padded this with the attorney. And I have to ask you this. Let me write this down because I'm going to forget. I'm just going to put Erickson, okay, and remind me to explain what Erickson said in the show one day when I said to myself, what? He did what? Okay, so they're saying that it was a campaign expense, that that it should have showed up on his campaign expense, but apparently under the campaign finance laws, it's illegal to pay somebody off and have that be used as a campaign expense as far as a deduction is concerned. So in other words, no matter what he did, it was wrong. And the whole crazy thing about this is that, once again, this was not anything that the FEC, which is the Federal Election Commission, called him on the carpet on. So in other words, and that's sort of the point of this whole crazy trial, is this Alvin Bragg has turned this in. And the other thing about it is, this happened in 2016, okay? There's this thing called the statute of limitations. And typically, for most crimes, there are some crimes that are exempt from that. I believe murder and rape are exempt from the statute of limitations. But pretty much everything else has a statute of limitations. If you get arrested for disorderly conduct and you don't show up in court, essentially they may put out a warrant for your arrest, but after a certain amount of time, it just goes by the wayside. And that's the whole crazy thing with this, is that how in the world something that should be a federal case by the FEC is now in a state court, and it's well past the statute of limitations, because the last time I looked, this is 2024. The original charges were filed in 2023. So you take 2016 and 2023. To me, that's 7 years. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, but I think we've seen before, though, that everything changed on January 6th, Brad.
Well,
I think once our nation was under attack by a guy in a Viking helmet and a group of people who did not obey the velvet ropes, I think, to me, that's a pretty good reason to pause the Constitution.
If this were anybody else, let's be honest, if this were anybody else but Trump, this wouldn't be happening. And the crazy thing for me is that you hear more and more increasingly these talking heads on CNN and MSNBC talk about, oh my God, if Trump gets reelected, we're going to lose democracy. Okay, let's go back to the 4 years that we had Trump as president.
Yes.
We didn't have any wars. We didn't have all the crazy crap going on in Gaza. We didn't have the Afghanistan situation. Well, technically, we did have the war. We still have the Afghanistan.
But it was different. It was much different.
But he was phasing that down. He essentially was essentially, turning down the heat, and essentially they were withdrawing a lot of troops. And quite honestly, I think it was wasn't it like the last year or something we had troops in Afghanistan? There were hardly any skirmishes. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there was like a whole year that went by that there were no Americans killed in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So
I think so.
I
think so, Brad.
Remember when after remember the what was it, and I still can't believe this happened. Remember what he got? Didn't he get inaugurated? What day of the week was that? It was like a Thursday or Friday. That would have been January 2017. And on Saturday, Madonna showed up at a big rally with all the ladies wearing their cute little pink hats.
Oh, the yarn vaginas on top of their head.
And Madonna said she's going to blow up the White House or burn it down. Didn't she say something like that?
Yeah, which is pretty reasonable, Brad. I mean, but it was just free speech.
Right, and then they talked to all the financial experts and all the Talking Heads financial experts channel. We're going like, well, now that Trump is the president, the stock market's going to crater and it's going to go into the toilet. Now, John is a guy who watches the stock market very closely, okay? My question to you, John, is what happened when Trump took office? What did the stock market do?
Even idiots made money.
Yes, it went.
If we had a great financial advisor like Mike McGee from Edward Jones on, he would tell you that even subpar investment advisors made their clients money during the Trump years.
Because the stock market exploded and took off and went like a rocket. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, you're absolutely. And now, Brad, not to undermine your point there, but what Democrats will point to, and this is the challenge when you attribute a presidential success like Republicans or Democrats do to the stock market, it is one factor. But also Democrats, I think, if the S&P 500, so a broad index of stocks, of roughly 500 stocks, if the S&P index is up in 2024, as we get close to September and October, Democrats will point to, if the S&P is up 8% and say, but look, we haven't had these gains in, years. The economy's back, baby. Look at the stock market. So the challenge is for Democrats and Republicans, you don't want to tie your administration success too closely to the stock market. And frankly, Donald Trump did a whole lot of that. But to your point, Brad, yes, the stock market was fantastic. Then, of course, we had COVID in 2020, and we saw what happened there. But the market bounced right back, didn't it?
Well, and the crazy thing about this is all the things that they say Trump was going to do, and he was going to, enact martial law, and he was going to make everybody, it was just all this bizarre stuff. Nothing like that happened. Now,
remember, it was going to be, you don't want that man with his finger on the button late at night answering the phone. And we'll have World War III.
Right. And there were people going, they should take the codes away from him because he might wake up in the middle of the night and say, let's attack Russia. Now,
yeah, but hey, you know what, as we say though, Brad, at least there's no mean tweets anymore.
Now, let me go way back on this. Okay, I'm going to turn the Wayback Machine to the year 2012, 12 years ago, okay? And I personally witnessed this, where the debate between Barack Obama, who was running for re-election, and Mitt Romney. And this was a debate where they're going back and forth. And Mitt Romney came out and said, when the moderator asked him what he felt were some of the major issues that he would address himself to if he were elected president, he referenced the fact that he was very concerned about Russia. Very concerned about Russia. And there's the classic quote that you can probably pull it up on YouTube, where Barack Obama comes back and says, well, Mr. Romney, the 1980s have called and they want their policy back. In other words, making fun of the fact that he felt that Russia's no problem anymore. Russia's, So fast forward to 2024. What do we have now? We have an even stronger, emboldened Russia because of the fact that they've gone into Ukraine. Essentially, they're flipping the third finger, or Vladimir Putin is flipping the third finger to the world that, look, if I want to, go into Ukraine, you can't stop me.
Yeah, for sure.
They've now created the evil empire between him and Iraq and China. No, excuse me, Iran, China, and Russia. I'm going like, okay, once again, 2012, Mitt Romney, who I know a lot of Republicans don't like, he saw this on the horizon. And you can even say that Trump is somewhat guilty of this because, remember, and look at all the people that said, what was it, George W. Bush said, I've looked into the man's eyes and he's a good human being. Well, he got that wrong. And even Trump made a couple trips to Russia And remember the crazy thing about when Obama was in Russia and they caught a hot mic moment where he said to one of Russia's head people, when I get reelected, I'll have a lot of leeway for Russia or some crazy thing like that.
Yep, something to that effect.
Okay, once again, we have countries that are on our side that support us. I would say Canada is one of those countries. I would now say Mexico is not one of those countries.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say UK is one of those countries. France, a lot of the Western European countries, when it comes right down to it, they support us. Okay, once again, let's support our allies and let's essentially be hardline with our enemies because they do not wish us well. And I don't understand where people go, well, you got to understand the Chinese people. No, the Chinese people have this incredible focus, which we do not. John knows by watching the stock market that the United States economy essentially is quarter to quarter. The big thing is, like you always talk about, the quarterly reports. Hey, it's April and the first quarter reports are coming out. And everybody's, oh my God, how did General Motors do? That kind of stuff. The Chinese have this 100-year view where they're looking way down the road and saying, okay, we're here right now. In 100 years, we want to be here, but here's what we have to do in the interim, blunk, 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 blunk. And we don't have that view. And the sad part of it is we have this election system where we have Trump who gets in the office for 4 years, and then, the border situation is to a large degree taken care of. What is first, second day that Biden's in office, he signs all these executive orders. Hey, let anybody into the border.
Get rid of remain in Mexico.
Right.
Yeah, all these other things. And then it's open season, Brad.
Right.
But first of all, Brad, they're newcomers. So let's remember to get our nomenclature correct.
Then we have the Keystone Pipeline. We don't need that. And then gas prices shoot up. Yeah, it's just, I don't get it. Okay.
I don't know, but real quickly though, Brad, don't forget that even during the Trump administration and prior to that, we also had a guy that was going around to colleges in the St. Louis area indoctrinating kids about the Chinese technology called TikTok. And they never put a finger on that man. Like, I heard he's on the radio sometimes, but he was an evangelist for TikTok. And when you have Chinese propaganda infecting and infesting our schools like that, what do you expect, Brad?
John's making fun of me because he's making a veiled reference to the fact that I used to make a presentation 3 times a year to the students at Logan University. I gave a little seminar on marketing and things like that. And I was asked, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's had to be like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, what I thought was one of the emerging I don't even know, emerging advertising.
Technologies, platforms.
Well, emerging advertising.
For short-form vertical video.
Well, emerging advertising platforms. And I said TikTok. And most of the people in the room had no idea what I was talking about. And once again,
right.
I'm the oldest guy in the room. These are all young, 20, 30-somethings in there, getting their degree to be a chiropractor. And and once again, now the crazy part of that is that I said it was going to be a success, and it's been a success. Matter of fact, some people say it's been too much of a success, but leave it neither here or there. Okay, second thing, reading some interesting articles about Nashville. Okay, Oracle, Larry Ellison, his headquarters was in California. 3 years ago, they moved to Texas. Guess what? He announced they're moving the headquarters to Nashville now. So if you're an executive for Oracle, in 4 years, you would say, well, we lived in California, and then we lived in Texas. Now we live in Nashville. And the interesting thing is there now is a growing group of citizens who are going like, okay, we don't want this anymore. We love Nashville the way it is. We don't like what it's turning into. And the housing prices there are going through the ceiling.
So in other words, are they going to run their own version of the Keep Austin Weird campaign?
I don't know.
And what would it be? Keep Nashville bachelorette parties?
Yes,
what would the campaign be, Brad?
It was funny you should mention that because the article I read talked about that was one of the hot spots. That was one of the drawing cards for Nashville, that it's become the bachelorette party capital of the United States.
Which I'm sure the men in Nashville are quite happy about.
Right.
That.
The only problem you have to watch out for is if you're in certain venues, you have to watch out for chairs being thrown off the 6th floor.
I heard that. Yeah, I heard Morgan Wallen. And it was Morgan Wallen, right?
Yes. Okay.
Oh, yeah. That's what I thought. What a bad boy.
Yeah. Last but not least, Erickson. Erick Erickson is on the air on this very radio station between noon and 3. Erick Erickson is the guy who started Red State, sold it off. Somebody else runs it right now. But Erick Erickson has an interesting background in that he is an American citizen, although I can't remember what his dad did, but he went to school, of all places, in Dubai. His dad was some kind of an international businessman, and I think his formative years, like his preteen and his teen years, were spent in Dubai. And then he came back to the United States, got his law degree. He said something, and you might understand this because I didn't get it. He said that when he still ran his law practice before he went into radio full-time, because he did it part-time, he used to fill in for Neil Bortz on WSB in Atlanta, which was the flagship station for Neil and is now the flagship station for Erick Erickson as well, too. He said his law practice was centered on campaigns, campaign law, and campaign financing. And he talked about the fact that he was one of those attorneys that people would send him money, politicians would send him money, and he would buy advertising under his name. Now, how is that legal? I mean,
well, he was probably talking about the fact that he probably ran independent expenditure campaigns. I'm guessing that's what he's talking about. So candidates would arrange for donors to give him money, and then as long as he didn't directly coordinate his messaging with the campaign, he could buy independent expenditures and avoid any kind of campaign finance donation limits.
So he was a PAC guy, essentially.
Yeah. It sounds like, so I'm unfamiliar with that situation, but yeah, that's certainly by the letter of the law legal.
Okay, now the reason that hit me strange is because of the fact that if John Combest wants to buy ads for his new car dealership, he calls me up, we negotiate the price, I put him on the air, and no big deal. Okay, if John Combest wants to run for state representative, I have to send John all these NAB forms, National Association Broadcasters forms. I have to have him fill it out. He has to tell me all these things about his campaign committee, has to tell me who his chairman is, has to sign all this paper. I have to sign all this paperwork. I have to file all these forms. Then I have to upload them to the FCC database, which anybody can look at for this station or any other station in the United States, and have to do all this stuff. And if you make one single mistake, the FCC can call you up and say, you know what, you screwed that up, and we're going to maybe not renew your license, which is like the death sentence in broadcasting. Okay, that's why when he said, well, I buy advertising for clients, I'm going like, how does he do that? Because of the fact.
Yeah, it's probably and I'm sure he follows the letter of the law. But I mean, if you know the law well, you can find out a way to take a whole lot of donor money and call it an independent expenditure and essentially advertise for campaigns for legally.
Well, now, big picture stuff. Let's go back to this, and I know people are going to roll their eyes on it, but wasn't this essentially, if you go back and look at all the crazy stuff that happened during the Russia thing, wasn't this the crux of the issue where the Hillary Clinton campaign gave money to some attorney firm, which gave money to some political firm, which essentially came up with the dossier, the
Russian disinformation.
Right. And essentially what they're doing is, to a certain extent, to me, it looks like they're laundering money. Isn't that sort of what's happening with something like that?
Yeah, taking a trip to the laundromat, so to speak. But again, and I hate to say this, Brad, it is true, but I hate to rely on a lazy argument. But the idea that both sides or all sides do it, I mean, you're going to manipulate campaign finance laws to get around any kind of campaign finance limits, or at best case to obfuscate where the money is coming from. So if you have a whole bunch of money coming from developers, or let's say in 2024, the pharma industry, you're not going to want to be supported by Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson or, God forbid, Bayer Pharma. You would want to have that money go through certain groups and call it a different name.
Man, I'll tell you what.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?